In talking about antique bottles, we certainly have to get into the different types of tops that these bottles have. And generally, we're talking bottles made before 1900. They're essentially divided into tooled top styles and applied top. After 1918 or so, you'll still see bottles, and I'll show you a couple from the late 1910s, 20s that are still tool top, but eventually move on to machine-made style tops. Some of the earlier tops, this is an applied tapered collar, and you can see it's just a tapered top with that has been applied. Now, when these bottles were made, this is an early Hofstadter's bottle. When they removed it from the mold, it was extremely hot, so they needed a way to hold the bottle, and we've discussed that in bases. In this case, they would use a snap case. They would hold the bottle, and they would apply this top. And there are different ways to determine whether a bottle has an applied top or a tool top. One is you can see this seam that runs on each side. This is a two-part mold. So they blew the bottle itself into the mold, and then they applied this top. And you can see that the mold itself goes underneath this top. It's very clear how it runs underneath. It also has this giveaway, which is a little drippiness coming from the top, and that is a result of just applying the top and having excess glass run down the neck just a little bit. Here's another kind of an interesting top. This is called an applied square collar, and this is on a John and William Daly liquor bottle from New York, and these particular bottles all have this very similar style applied square collar. It's very early, and as you can see, quite a large mouth to it. Earlier bottles, this was free blown. You can see the sand and all the sediment that didn't get stirred up properly in the molten glass pot, also called metal. This has a free-blown base style to it called a kick-up, and you'll still see these on champagne bottles today. This bottle was free-blown. It was snapped off, and then they finished it with this band that went around to give it a final little finish to it, which made it just a little nicer, a little classier than leaving just an open snap top on it. Okay, we've got a couple flasks here, and I want to show you the difference between these. Even though they're not really that different in age, these bottles are made completely different. This one is around the 80s, early 80s, maybe just a few years even can separate an applied top bottle versus a tooled top. You can see where this bottle was blown in the mold. They took it out, they held it, they applied this top, and then they used a tool to fashion it into what is called a double roll collar. The seam, once again, rolls underneath the entire top area. On this one, the entire bottle was blown into a mold, and then they fashioned the top to look like a double roll collar. And you can see this seam, it just kind of wanders off, and that's because when they took this out, they used a tool to turn it, and it created these kind of stretch or turn marks in the top. Another great example of that is in these two fifths. These are the same bottle, the OPS bourbon whiskey, and one is applied, the earlier variant, and one is a tool top variant, and this actually has the original label The applied top, once again, you can see it has an applied top. They held the bottle, they applied the top, and then they used a tool to fashion it to a final product. In this particular example, they made the entire bottle in the mold, and then they fashioned the top with a tool, and you'll see once again the seam just kind of wanders off with no drip, and a very neater style top, but generally certainly a later variant. Now, once again, this bottle may be 1885, somewhere around there, where this may be 1890. It really depended on the glass house, what types of glass blowers were there, what they preferred to use, and that's why we see different tops. We were talking about this double roll collar on this. We also see a number of flasks, like this really nice crown shoulder cutter flask with a single roll collar. And this is an applied single roll collar. You can see the seam. It's sometimes a little hard to see, but it will go straight underneath, and that tells you that this is an applied top. This is another example of an early screw top where they made the entire bottle in one mold, and they fashioned the top so that it would have these screws. Then they took it, they ground the top down on a wheel, much like putting it against a turning flat sandpaper, and then they created the lid, which was a big deal, because before that you had to use a cork on all these, and that was often a bit of a chore. So this was really kind of a big deal, although it never really caught on. We didn't see a whole lot of bottles until probably 10 years later, when most flasks that were made had the screw top, and you'll see those in both tooled and the machine made. Here is a really late example of a tooled top bottle. This is probably about as late as they come. I wouldn't doubt that just probably right before the automatic bottling machine was invented, and that was around 1918. It depended on the glass house again, you know, whether or not they had the money to afford a new machine. Obviously, if you've seen pictures, and there are some on our website that show these monstrosities that made the entire bottle by itself without having to tool the top, do anything to it. They would come out exactly like this. And here is an example of what is considered an antique bottle. Has the original label, but you can see that the seam runs all the way up, and it's a very tiny hair line thickness type seam that runs all the way up to the bottle. This bottle was made by an automatic bottling machine, which was a real huge deal back then, because they could make many more bottles in a much shorter period of time, and they were all perfect. So you lost this kind of individuality that you'd see in the earlier bottles by using the automatic bottling machine. So once again, we have the applied top, we have the tooled top, and we have the machine-made bottles, which are still made today using obviously a much more advanced method, but still the same idea, blowing a bottle with a machine versus the glass blower individually making each bottle. So that pretty much tells you about tops. We will get into the different type bottles and the many different style tops. It's very interesting depending on what bottles you're looking at, but there are as many tops as there are bottles. So we'll get into that on another video. And thanks for joining us.